Last year, an Argentinian farmer was walking on his property when he spotted something strange in a dried riverbed. He would soon discover the fossilized remains of 4 glyptodons, an ancient species of armadillo that was roughly the size of a modern-day smart car. This butterfly is nicknamed Anna's 88 due to the pattern on its back that resembles the number 88. Aerial photographer Robert Haas was taking photos over the Yucatan when he captured something spectacular. A bunch of flamingos were hanging out in the shape of a giant flamingo. This kid knocked down every pin except for 7, 8, 9, and 10. In 1999, skydiver Joan Murray's parachute malfunctioned, causing her to fall from 14,000 feet directly onto a mound of fire ants. But doctors think the shock of adrenaline from 200 fire ant stings kept her heart beating and saved her life. In 2014, a scrap metal dealer from California bought a golden egg for $14,000 at a yard sale, hoping he could flip it for a quick profit. But after finding out the metal was worth less than he'd hoped for, he decided to take it to an antiques expert instead. It turned out to be an extremely rare Fabergé egg that once belonged to the Emperor of Russia, worth an estimated $33 million. In 2015, 2 Spanish conmen sold a fake painting for 1.5 million euros, only to find out that the money was counterfeit. This egg that was laid naturally by a chicken looks exactly like a Kinder Surprise egg. In 1991, a woman from Thailand accidentally slipped in mud, grabbed a live wire, and was electrocuted to death. Later that day, when her sister was showing the neighbors how the accident happened, she slipped, grabbed the same live wire, and died. In March of 2005, the Powerball had 110 second-place winners, totaling $19 million in prizes. While lottery officials suspected fraud, it turned out that the Wonton Food Company correctly predicted the winning numbers and printed them on thousands of fortune cookies. The fortune read, "All of the preparation you've done will finally pay off." In 1871, a man survived the sinking of a ship, but it left him with a horrible fear of the ocean. 41 years later, he was finally able to overcome his fear and sail again, only to die in the sinking of that new ship, the Titanic. In the 1980s, a family owned a ceramics factory in California called Oscar Ceramics. But in 1987, the factory was revealed to be an illegal crematorium. This only happened because a passerby who happened to be a Holocaust survivor recognized the smell of burning bodies from his time at Auschwitz. 2013, a New York family bought a $3 bowl at a garage sale and displayed it on their mantle for years. They eventually decided to get it checked out, and it ended up being a 1,000-year-old Chinese ding bowl worth $2.2 million. The only other bowl of its kind in the world had been in the British Museum for over 60 years. In 1994, a crime watch in Homestead, Florida was holding its first meeting outside. As the police chief was explaining what to look out for, a 75-pound bag of coke fell from the sky and landed right near the group. It was ejected by a smuggler who had been flying overhead. In 1963, a man from Turkey knocked down a wall in his home while making some renovations. Behind the wall, he found a cave-like room that led to a tunnel system with more ancient rooms. He had discovered the ancient underground city of Derinkuyu. In 1984, NYPD officer Robert Cunningham decided to tip his waitress with a lottery ticket instead of cash. He told her they could split the winnings if she helped him pick the numbers. Sure enough, Cunningham won the state jackpot of $6 million, and true to his word, gave the waitress half. In 1902, the Mount Pele eruption killed all 30,000 people in a village except for a criminal who was on death row. He was locked up deep underground in solitary confinement, which served as the perfect shelter from the blast. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a terrorist planned on blowing up Moscow's Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed miserably when she received a spam text wishing her a Happy New Year. This caused the bomb to detonate while she was still at the safe house, and she was the only person who died. A woman named Claire bought a card table for $25 at a yard sale because she thought it looked nice. 30 years later, she found out that it was one of only 6 tables in the world made by furniture makers John Seymour and Son. So she brought it to an auction and made $540,000. World War I ended at 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. This turtle shell naturally has the word God written on it. April 15th has been a notoriously tragic day in our world's history. Lincoln's assassination, the sinking of the Titanic, the Hillsborough disaster, the Boston bombing, and the Notre Dame Cathedral fire all occurred on April 15. New Jersey grandma Patricia DeMoro walked to a craps table with $100 at an Atlantic City casino. Over 4 hours later, she'd set the world record for craps rolls at 154, shattering the previous record of 112. Her winnings were not disclosed to the public, but the odds of accomplishing what she did are about 1 in 1.56 trillion. World War I was sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914. In the car he was killed in, the license plate spelled out A111118, which was the exact date the armistice was signed to end the war. In 1915, a Mexican man named Wenceslao Moguel was sentenced to execution and shot 9 times by a firing squad. But he managed to survive every shot, including the coup de grace, a final shot to the head at point-blank range to ensure death. He lived for another 60 years, finally dying in 1976. A 42-year-old Russian fisherman was viciously attacked by a bear in 2014. But he was spared when the ringtone his granddaughter installed onto his phone suddenly went off. Justin Bieber's song Baby miraculously sent the bear running back into the woods. Last week on pt.2 2022, NBA player Desmond Baines had the ultimate Groundhog Day stat line. He had 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, 2 turnovers, 2 fouls, and shot 22.2% from the floor. Even crazier, Desmond Baines wears number 22. In 2010, Mexican singer Sergio Vega publicly denied a news report that he had been murdered. 1 hour later, he was murdered. In 2015, a dying fisherman told his 2 buddies to use his ashes as bait mix. Soon after he died, they used his ashes to catch this 180-pound monster carp, one of the largest ever caught. While watching Stuart Little with his daughter in 2009, a Hungarian art historian spotted a famous long-lost painting that was used as a prop. Sleeping Lady with a Black Vase had been missing since 1928 until a Stuart Little set designer picked it up at an antique shop for $500. The historian contacted producers to alert them of its value, and the painting was later sold for more than $300K. After watching a documentary about an apartment that was once used as a torture chamber, Katrina McGaw realized that she was actually living in the same apartment. In the 1980s, a man with severe OCD shot himself in the head attempting to take his own life. But instead of killing him, the bullet destroyed the part of his brain that was responsible for his OCD. And he went on to become a straight-A college student 5 years later. British man Stephen Whiteley turned a $3 bet into $2 million after picking all 6 horse race winners to win the jackpot. The final winning horse had never won in his previous 28 races. For the first half of his life, Hungarian man Adam Rayner was barely 4 feet tall as a result of dwarfism. But during his 20s, a pituitary tumor caused a dramatic growth spurt, and by age 33, he was 7'2". He's the only person in recorded history to have been both a dwarf and a giant. Last Tuesday, baby Simon Thomas was born at 2:22 on 2/22/22 in hospital room number 2. In 1935, an Australian fisherman reeled in a tiger shark and put it on display in the Sydney Aquarium until it vomited a human arm. A shark expert concluded that the arm had not been bitten off but was cleanly removed with a blade. This resulted in a murder investigation and the eventual arrest of the killers. In 1992, a man from Great Britain was using a metal detector to find a lost hammer on his farm. But instead, he stumbled upon one of the largest collections of Roman coins in the world, worth over $5 million today. In 2013, Hanukkah began on the same day as Thanksgiving on November 28th. This convergence, known as Thanksgivika, won't happen again until the year 79,811. In 2007, a bowhead whale was discovered with the end of a harpoon in its neck. It was found that the harpoon tip dated back to the year 1890, proving that the bowhead whale is the world's oldest known living mammal. In 1985, the U.S. Navy said it was searching for the Titanic as a cover story for their mission to find 2 missing nuclear submarines. But they had a little extra time once they located them, so they decided to look for the Titanic, and they actually found it. In 1974, a photographer was snapping photos of 2 amateur street mimes in Central Park. 35 years later, he discovered that one of them was actor Robin Williams before he became famous. A Reddit user from California was gaming in his room when a stray bullet went through his window and struck him in the head. But he was miraculously saved by his Razer headset, which prevented the bullet from piercing his skull. Diana Ross, who sang Ain't No Mountain High Enough, lost her husband in a mountain climbing accident. In 1983, a man confessed to the murder of his wife after a female skull was found in a peat bog near his home. He was convicted of her 1961 murder solely based on this confession. But it turned out that the skull actually belonged to a woman who had died nearly 1,800 years earlier. After this discovery, the man withdrew his confession but was convicted anyway. In 2019, an Australian man was walking his dog named Lucky when he accidentally kicked something hard that looked like dog poop. Upon picking it up, he quickly realized it was actually a gold nugget worth around $35,000. In 1836, the original patent for the fire hydrant was destroyed in a fire when the U.S. Patent Office burned to the ground. Thus, the true inventor of the fire hydrant remains a mystery. Alexander I of Yugoslavia refused to make a public appearance on a Tuesday after 3 of his family members died on a Tuesday. After finally being forced to appear on a Tuesday, he was promptly assassinated. In 1949, 12-year-old Charles Cohen hid inside of a closet while a mass murderer shot and killed his entire family. Nearly 70 years later, his granddaughter would survive the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting by hiding in a closet. In the year 2000, Rick Norsegian went to a garage sale looking for a barber chair but ended up purchasing 2 boxes of old photos for $45. 4 years later, he discovered that the boxes contained 65 glass plate negatives from famous photographer Ansel Adams, worth right around $200 million. The crew of this ship raised its anchor, only to realize it was hooked on an unexploded torpedo. After Martin Luther King was killed in 1968, his funeral was held at Morehouse College in Atlanta. A small group of current students were chosen to be ushers at his funeral, and one of them was Samuel L. Jackson. Violet Jessop was a ship nurse in the early 1900s who couldn't seem to avoid disaster. She was on the Titanic when it sank, the Britannic when it was struck by a torpedo, and the Olympic when it collided with another ship. Violet managed to survive all 3.